Hugh Hendry, welcome to HARDtalk.
Thank you.
You are a risk taker at a time when regulators are trying to de-risk financial markets. Does that make life difficult for you?
Yes, it does. And I think it, by implication, makes life difficult for everyone. And risk is used commonly, and I don't know if it's fully understood. Is risk truth? Is what I do the pursuit of truth, and therefore have we reached a point in society where the truth is perhaps unpalatable, and therefore we bring forward this notion of reining in the truth? It's a deeper
Search
issue.
for truth would be one way of putting it. Another way of putting it to some people who observe what's happened in the markets in the last 2 or 3 years would be seeing it as a form of gambling, betting.
Well, I think the objection to what's gone on has been the lack of symmetry. There is, I think most people accept there's one thing to make a lot of money, to be successful, and I think everyone supports it. It's when it goes the other way, yeah, and when it invokes the notion of a subsidy or a bailout. I think that's what rankles in the mind, and that's what's causing this debate, this much needed debate. Now, I would say what we've seen in the last 3 years, that's not capitalism. Once you've underwritten risk, I promise you my risk-taking is not underwritten by the public purse.
You're talking about the big banks and the degree to which, when they ran into huge trouble, it was governments who rushed in to bail them out and to save them.
So I guess I'm drawing a distinction between the banking community and the hedge fund community.
And I want to explore the difference between the two. But before I get there, I just want to stick with the notion of what you do and how to define it. You make not all of your money, but a lot of your money by taking a negative view, by sort of ruthlessly exposing what you see as the overvaluation of certain assets or currencies or even national economies. And that makes you enemies, doesn't it?
I'm kind of gasping for air with the adjectives ruthless. If only I were ruthless. I tell you.
Capitalism's a ruthless business.
It can be, yeah. And
it has to be. Doesn't it have to be?
It should be. You're quite right. It should be. Again, back to the symmetry. I get something right, well done me. I get something wrong, I pay for the consequences. You're quite right. I'd put it slightly different. I would say my earliest report card, if you will, when I was at school, very, very young, 5 or 6 years old. And I promise you, they said, a very nice young chap, but they said, my goodness, for someone so young, he worries. He's a great worrier. And if you will, I've grown up and I've capitalized upon my propensity to worry about things. So I take risk, and then I'm full of foreboding and I'm full of fear that I've got things wrong. And that makes me a good and a conscious risk taker.
I'm sure your school report didn't describe you as a vulture or a hunting dog, but there are politicians who you've clashed with in the last year or so who've pointed to the activities you're involved in with your hedge fund and have said, this is quoting the Danish MEP, former Danish Prime Minister, Mr. Rasmussen, these guys are like vultures or hunting dogs. When a state is in trouble, you can be sure in a nanosecond that the hedge funds will be out with their attack.
Indeed. I mean, he should be a poet, clearly. I think Hollywood beckons for someone. I think he could write a very, very long and tiring narrative. I had a similar diatribe with the Central Bank of Hungary. The Central Bank of Hungary sat idly as their population took mortgages denominated in Swiss francs and in Japanese yen. And they did so because the cost of borrowing those currencies seemed very modest when compared to borrowing in Hungarian forint. But they were taking on an enormous financial risk, which was called to bear. So I would say, and he said, we're like the little antelope, and these dogs are attacking us, these lions are attacking us. But he ignores the fact that he was playing games with economic equilibrium. I would say to you, I'm a guard dog of capitalism. My role is to preserve the role of capitalism.
But you have power without accountability.
If only. Please give me some power. I have no power. And I'm not guaranteed to make money. If only I were guaranteed to make money.
But
if only it were easy to make money.
I'm not suggesting you always make money, but the way you and other hedge funds work, gives you an enormous amount of clout. And we're talking now, whether we're talking Hungary or whether we're talking the Greek financial crisis, we're talking about democratic governments who see their currencies and their economies under fire from hedge funds such as yours. They are ultimately democratically elected. They have some sort of mandate, but you and the hedge funds undermine their economic strength.
No, my riposte to that is that you grossly exaggerate the size and the significance of the hedge fund community. In terms of trading volumes, in terms of assets under management, they are fleas compared to the asinine behavior that one finds in our pension funds, in our insurance companies.
But your own business doesn't actually believe that. Antonio Borges, who's chairman of the Hedge Fund Standards Board, whom we had on this show just a few weeks ago, said to us, he said, we hedge funds are market movers because everybody in the market understands that the hedge funds have more information and therefore they have clout. It is not just about size, he said.
I don't think you can make that a genetic term. I think you could certainly, that would be applicable to someone like George Soros, who over a course of 40 or 50 years of successfully speculating, when he raises an opinion, people listen. I can assure you, however, that if I were to raise my opinion, if I'm wrong, I get run over.
Well, let's not personalize it. Maybe your hedge fund and your current profile isn't as high as George Soros's, I accept that, but let's stick with Soros,
Sure.
or let's stick with somebody like John Poulson, who runs one of the huge American hedge funds. When they place a bet, and now we're talking about a short bet, that is betting that something will decline in value, not go up, shouldn't we all know about it? Isn't there a fundamental problem that the hedge funds are not transparent and other players in the market don't know about the bets you're placing?
I agree. Transparency is a good thing. I've got no complaint with transparency. Transparency is actually quite high, and especially the transparency applicable to US hedge funds. Paulson you mentioned, and indeed Soros, they have very large positions in gold. These are known. And I might add that Paulson, year to date is losing money. So again, he's not guaranteed any money just from a previous success in another year.
So when the EU and indeed the US through the SEC, Securities and Exchange Commission, are seeking to introduce new rules, more transparency, more clarity about the leverage that you're undertaking, the risks you're undertaking, you're entirely happy with that?
I don't think anyone has an issue with that. It's when you come to the notion of blanket bans. That's when it's very, very interesting, and that's when there are howls of protest.
But again, if the German government, for example, wants to ban certain forms of short selling, they are entitled to do so, are they not?
Of course they are. Of course they are. But once you start, remember, what are you doing? You're banning behavior.
What they would regard as abusive and dangerous behavior, deleterious to their economy.
But that is a normal, that is a value judgment taken by them. And that may be inspired by the fact that it reveals either inconsistencies or mistakes that they are responsible for and they don't wish to come to light.